I didn't even want the job. That's the part that bothers me most when I think about it now. If I had just ignored the posting, if I just swallowed my pride and asked my brother for money, if I had just let the bills pile up, maybe I wouldn't be here, writing this, hoping someone will believe me before it's too late. The job was simple on paper. Night caretaker, Fair Hill Cemetery, midnight to 6 a.m., light duties, $600 a week. Must be comfortable working alone. Alone. That word should have been the first warning sign. Fair Hill Cemetery isn't small. It's a sprawling old burial ground that stretches for acres, parts of it dating back to the 1800s. Some graves are so old the names are nothing but smoothed over stone. The whole place feels ancient, like it has roots that go deeper than just the town's history. I'd passed by it a few times growing up. Tall iron gates, stone angels weathered to blank faces. The kind of cemetery you see in horror movies, except real. When I got the job, the interview was strange. The man who hired me barely looked at me. He was thin, pale, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. He slid a paper across the desk. I signed it, and that was it. "Your uniform is in the caretaker's shed," he said, voice raspy. "Keys to the gates are already inside. Do your rounds. Stay on the paths. Don't go wandering." I remember blinking. "That's it?" He nodded once, then leaned forward. His eyes looked too dark, like his pupils swallowed the color around them. "And whatever you hear," he added, "ignore it." I thought he meant kids, vandals, maybe stray animals. I wish to God that's what he meant. The first night. The cemetery was cold even in August. Fog clung low to the ground, and the lamps along the gravel paths flickered with weak orange light. The shed sat near the entrance, cluttered with tools, a rust-eaten chair, and the smell of damp earth. I put on the uniform, a black jacket with the cemetery's name stitched on it, and grabbed the ring of keys. My shift had begun. The first hour was uneventful. I walked the perimeter, flashlight beam catching on stone crosses and angel wings. My boots crunched gravel, and every sound echoed too loud in the silence. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I noticed something strange. A grave I didn't remember seeing earlier. It wasn't old. The soil was freshly turned, a mound of dirt piled neatly, the headstone clean and unweathered. No flowers, no signs of mourning, just new. I squatted down to read the name, but the stone was blank. Smooth gray, like it hadn't been carved yet. I told myself it was just a plot waiting for engraving. Maybe someone had just been buried, and the family hadn't ordered the inscription. Still, something about it unsettled me. As I walked away, I could swear I heard the dirt shift. Just a faint crunch, like something moving underneath. The second night. I told myself not to be superstitious. Cemeteries are creepy places. Of course, I'd imagined things. But when I came back the next night, there was another new grave. Same freshly turned soil. Same blank stone. This one was closer to the shed, right along the main path, as if someone had dug it in broad daylight while nobody noticed. I knelt down again, still blank. My fingers brushed the stone, cold, smoother than marble. Too perfect. That's when I noticed the first grave. It wasn't blank anymore. In shallow, rough carvings, a name had appeared. Michael Barnes. My name. The date of birth was correct. The date of death was blank. I stood there for a long time, frozen, my breath clouding in the air. I ran my fingers over the letters, but they didn't feel freshly carved. They felt old, like they had always been there. And then I heard it. A whisper. Faint, rising from the soil. "Lay down." I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. The dirt shifted again, almost like it was breathing. I ran that night. Didn't even finish my shift. In the third night, I should have quit. Any sane person would have. But the paycheck had already hit my account, and something in me, I don't know, curiosity, pride, stupidity, something made me go back. The graves were still there. The first one with my name. The second still blank. I avoided looking at them and started walking the far paths. My flashlight caught movement near the older stones. At first, I thought it was mist. Then I realized it was figures. Pale, faint shapes standing among the headstones. Men, women, some tall, some hunched. Their faces were hollow shadows. They didn't move. They just watched. And then, from all around me, in dozens of voices, the whisper came again. "Lay down!" I bolted for the shed. Inside, the mirror above the sink caught my reflection, except it wasn't me. It was me in the caretaker uniform, but older, thinner, eyes sunken just like the man who hired me, and carved across the reflection's forehead, faint but undeniable, were the words, "I didn't sleep when I got home." Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the dirt shifting under me, pressing down on my chest, filling my mouth. By the time the next shift rolled around, I was pale, shaky, but I went anyway. Some part of me knew I had no choice. The cemetery doesn't let you walk away. The moment I stepped through the gates, I felt it. Not fear, not even dread. Something heavier, like the ground was tugging at me with invisible strings. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, hallucinations, stress. But the second grave, the one that had been blank, now had writing. My name again. Not Michael Barnes, not my twin brother or some stranger with the same name. Me. Except this one had both dates filled. Michael Barnes, 1994 to 2023. I ran my thumb over the numbers. They weren't scratched. They weren't etched. They were part of the stone itself. Permanent. Ancient. I stumbled back and nearly fell into the open grave that now yawned behind the headstone. I swear to you, it hadn't been there before. Freshly dug, wide enough for a man to lie in. The soil at the edges was wet, as if something had clawed its way out. And the whispering grew louder. "Lay down!" Back at the shed, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A drawer at the bottom of the desk. It stuck when I pulled, but eventually came free with a groan of rust. Inside were notebooks. Dozens of them, thin leather-bound, the pages yellowed. Each one was filled with neat, cramped handwriting. Caretaker logs. I skimmed through them. The earliest was from 1891. They told me to keep watch. They told me I'd be safe if I stayed on the paths. But the graves move at night. I hear them whispering. I hear them calling my name. Page after page, the same story. Different names, different decades, same whispers, same graves. Some caretakers lasted weeks, some years. All of them wrote about graves appearing with their names carved into the stones. And all of them ended the same way. The last entry always trailed off mid-sentence, as if the writer had been pulled away before finishing. I didn't want to go back, but the pull was stronger now. The cemetery wasn't just waiting, it was demanding. When I stepped through the gate that night, the lamps along the path flickered in unison, one by one, like they were greeting me. The graves were everywhere now. Not just two, not three. Dozens. All of them freshly dug, blank stones. Except one. Mine. The open grave waited, neat and dark. The soil at the bottom looked soft, almost welcoming. I forced myself to look away and walked deeper into the cemetery. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could find the man who hired me. Maybe I thought he'd explain. What I found instead was him, or rather, what was left of him. At the far edge of the cemetery, leaning against a row of ancient stones, was a figure in a caretaker's jacket. Skin shriveled, eyes black pits, lips peeled back from yellow teeth. His hands clutched a rusted lantern that flickered dimly. When he raised his head, I realized it wasn't a man at all. It was a husk, a puppet. And when it opened its mouth, dozens of voices poured out in a chorus. Lay down. The air turned freezing. My flashlight sputtered and died. And in the darkness, I heard hundreds of hands clawing at the dirt, the sound of graves opening. I ran back to the shed, heart hammering, the whispers chasing me. I slammed the door, shoved the desk against it, breathing hard. And that's when I noticed something new in the mirror. It wasn't my reflection. It was me, but older. Years older. Hair grayer, eyes hollow, just like the husk I'd seen. He raised his hand and pressed it against the glass. I felt my own hand lift, as if something else controlled it, until our palms aligned. And in that moment, I understood. The caretaker doesn't quit. The caretaker doesn't retire. The caretaker never leaves. The cemetery chooses you, and once it does, it writes your name in stone. The open grave isn't a threat, it's a promise. And when your time comes, you don't get buried. You become part of the cemetery. Your body keeps walking. Your voice joins the chorus. You are another husk to whisper the command to the next poor soul. Lay down. I shouldn't have gone back, but I didn't have a choice. The paycheck doesn't matter. The contract doesn't matter. The cemetery pulls you in, night after night, until you don't resist anymore. Tonight, the open grave is waiting. I can see it from the shed window, the soil shifting, almost eager. I can hear the voices outside, hundreds of them, calling, whispering, begging. The mirror shows me what I'll become. Hollow-eyed, lantern in hand. Just another mouth for the cemetery. I can feel myself slipping. My chest is heavy. My eyelids are heavy. The dirt is calling me home. If you're reading this, if you ever see the job posting, don't apply. Don't walk through the gates. Don't even look too long at Fair Hill Cemetery, because once it notices you, you've already been chosen, and the grave is already waiting. I used to laugh at the idea of haunted cemeteries. Ghost stories were fun to tell when you were a kid sitting around a fire, but by the time you're 20, they're just that, stories. That's what I thought, anyway. The night my friends dared me to go into Hollowbrook Cemetery. It's the oldest graveyard in town, half forgotten at the edge of the woods. People say it was built over a churchyard that burned down in the 1800s, that the ashes of the dead still linger in the soil. Most of the graves are so old, the names have worn away, just crooked stones leaning in the dark. We were drunk, of course. That's always how these stories start. There were 4 of us. Me, Brandon, his girlfriend Sarah, and my cousin Eli. It was Brandon's idea to bring beer and flashlights and sneak in. 1 hour, he said. First one to chicken out buys breakfast. We hopped the fence just before midnight. The air was damp, the grass slick under our shoes. Fog clung low to the ground like a blanket. At first, it was fun. We told jokes, dared each other to touch the oldest stones, tried to read the names where the letters had been eaten away by time. But at exactly midnight, everything went quiet. The crickets stopped. The wind died. Even our laughter felt too loud, swallowed by the stillness. That's when we saw her. At the far end of the cemetery, under a leafless tree, stood a woman in a black veil. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. She just knelt by a grave with no name, her head bowed as though she were weeping. Sarah gasped. Brandon whispered, "Holy shit." And then, without thinking, Eli cupped his hands around his mouth and called out, "Hey lady, you lose someone?" The figure froze. Slowly, her veiled head turned in our direction. We couldn't see her face, just darkness under the veil. But even from across the cemetery, I felt her looking at us. I don't know why we didn't run right then. Maybe because she didn't move toward us. Maybe because Brandon, being the idiot he always was, laughed and said, "It's just some goth chick messing with us." But deep down, I knew. Nobody else should have been there. The first omen. The next day, I woke up groggy and hungover. My phone buzzed. Text from Eli. "Dude, come to the cemetery. You gotta see this." I didn't want to go back, but curiosity won. When I got there, Eli was pale, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool morning air. He pointed to the grave where we'd seen the veiled woman. The stone was no longer blank. It had Eli's name on it. Not just his first name, his full name, etched deep into the granite like it had always been there. "Someone's screwing with me," he said, voice trembling. "It's a prank. Has to be." But I touched the letters. They weren't freshly carved. The edges were weathered, smoothed by time, like his grave had been waiting for him. "Enid the mourner. Returns." That night, Eli called me. "I can hear her," he whispered, crying, "outside my window. She won't stop." I told him to sleep, that he was imagining it. But when I hung up, I sat in the dark for hours, heart pounding, waiting for the sound of weeping. The next morning, Eli was gone. His bed was empty, his phone on the nightstand, his shoes still by the door. But when we went back to the cemetery, the grave where we'd seen the woman had changed again. Now it bore not just his name, but his date of death, yesterday's date, and the soil in front of the stone was freshly disturbed as if something had been buried during the night. One by one. Sarah wanted to call the cops, but what would we tell them? That a ghost kidnapped Eli? That a crying woman buried him in an unmarked grave? Brandon insisted Eli had just run off, maybe faking the whole thing for attention. But I knew better, because that night I heard the crying too. Soft at first, a woman's voice, mournful, broken, carrying through the still air. I thought it was outside my window, but when I opened it, the street was empty. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside, right behind me. When I spun around, no one was there. But I swear to you, I felt a hand brush the back of my neck, ice cold and trembling. And then, just like that, the crying stopped. I didn't tell Brandon or Sarah about what happened in my room. I should have, but I thought maybe if I kept it to myself, it wouldn't get worse. But it did. The next night, Sarah called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was shaky, whispering so low I could barely hear her. "She's outside my house." I sat up in bed. "Who?" "The woman." From the cemetery, I tried to calm her, tell her it was just her imagination, but Sarah cut me off. She was standing in the yard. I saw her through the window. She was looking up at me, and she was holding flowers. Her voice broke. They were dead, wilted. She put them down on the grass, and now she's just standing there, crying. The line went dead. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, I drove to her house. The front yard looked normal. No woman, no flowers. But when I walked up to the porch, I froze. A bouquet of roses lay on the doormat, petals black, stems brittle, dead for God knows how long, and tucked between them was a folded scrap of paper. On it, in spidery handwriting, were 3 words: "It is time." The second grave. Brandon and I went back to Hollowbrook that evening. We didn't speak much. Neither of us wanted to say out loud what we were both thinking. Sarah didn't answer her phone. We found her grave before we even reached the tree. Her name, her date of birth, and yesterday's date carved beneath. Fresh soil at the base of the stone, damp and black. Brandon dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with his hands, screaming her name. I grabbed him, pulled him back, but the ground beneath us was firm, like whatever was down there had been buried for decades, not hours. He was sobbing, gasping, punching the earth until his knuckles split. And then, as the sun dropped behind the trees, we heard it. The crying. The same low, broken sob we'd heard that first night, except now it was closer. Brandon froze. His head snapped toward the sound. And there she was, the veiled woman, just a few yards away, standing at the edge of the path, her head tilted as though in pity. In her hands, another bouquet of wilted roses. Brandon screamed and charged at her, but the moment he reached her, she vanished, like smoke. He fell to the ground, clutching at nothing, sobbing into the dirt. The waiting game. I dragged Brandon back to my car. He wouldn't stop crying, wouldn't stop muttering her name. That night, he refused to leave my apartment, said he didn't want to be alone. We stayed up together, lights on, beer bottles scattered across the table. For hours, nothing happened. And then, just past 3 in the morning, we both heard it. The crying. Not outside, not far away. Inside. It came from the corner of the living room, where shadows pooled in the glow of the lamp. Brandon was shaking, eyes wide, staring at the sound. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. I nodded. My mouth was too dry to speak. The crying grew louder. And slowly, something began to take shape in the shadows. A veil, a bowed head, hands clutching dead flowers. Brandon snapped. He grabbed a beer bottle and hurled it. The glass shattered against the wall, but the shape didn't move. It just cried louder. Brandon bolted for the door, screaming. I chased after him, but by the time I reached the hall, he was gone. Gone, as if he'd never been there at all. The third grave. I went back to the cemetery alone the next morning. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me already knew what I'd find. There it was, under the same tree. Brandon Miller, 1993 to 2023. Fresh soil, black and damp. And the veiled woman standing there, her head bowed, crying softly. This time, I didn't run. I stepped closer. "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Why them? Why us?" Slowly, she lifted her head. For the first time, I saw her face beneath the veil. Or rather, I saw nothing. Hollow sockets where eyes should be. Skin pale as a wax, stretched tight over bone. A mouth that never moved, even as the sobs poured out. And then she pointed one trembling finger at the ground, at the newest grave, at the stone that now bore my name. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the stone with my name carved into it. The mourner's finger stayed fixed on the grave, her body trembling with each ragged sob. The sound didn't come from her mouth. It poured out of the air itself, the way thunder rolls across the sky. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "I'm not like them. I didn't do anything." Her head tilted, slowly, almost pitying. And then I understood. It wasn't about what we did. It was about where we went. We disturbed her cemetery. And once you see her, once you hear her weeping, she claims you. The last night I tried everything to fight it. I left town, stayed with an uncle 2 hours away. But no matter how far I drove, the crying followed me. At night, outside the window, in the bathroom mirror, sometimes from under the bed, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. My reflection grew hollow, pale, sunken. Just like Eli, just like Sarah, just like Brandon. And then one night, I woke to find dirt on my sheets, damp soil clinging to my hands, my clothes, my hair, as though I had been digging, or as though something had been digging me out. The truth. I went back to Hollowbrook Cemetery. I couldn't fight it anymore. The mourner was waiting under the tree, her veil fluttering in the night wind, though the air was still. The 3 fresh graves lay before her, soil damp and black. Eli, Sarah, Brandon, and the 4th, mine. I walked closer. My legs felt like they weren't mine anymore, like invisible strings pulled them forward. The mourner stepped aside, gesturing to the grave. Her sobbing rose louder, louder, until it felt like my skull would split. I dropped to my knees in front of the stone. My name gleamed in the moonlight, the date of death carved deep into the granite. Today's date. The soil shifted. Something below the surface moved, pushing upward. And then I saw it. A hand, pale, thin, fingers clawing up through the dirt. My hand, rotten, decayed, but undeniably mine. The mourner wailed, louder than ever, her body shuddering as though the grief of centuries poured out of her all at once. I fell backward, screaming, because I realized the grave wasn't being prepared for me. I was already in it. Epilogue. I don't know how long it's been. I wake up sometimes in my apartment, sometimes in the cemetery. Dirt always clings to me. My nails are torn and black, my throat raw from screaming. When I look in mirrors, sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's the rotted version, grinning through broken teeth. I hear her crying every night. Sometimes it's far away. Sometimes it's right beside me. And I know soon the mourner will stop weeping for me. Because when she cries for you, it means you're already buried, and she's just waiting for you to realize it. The mourner stepped aside, gesturing to the grave. Her sobbing rose louder, louder, until it felt like my skull would split. I dropped to my knees in front of the stone. My name gleamed in the moonlight, the date of death carved deep into the granite. Today's date. The soil shifted. Something below the surface moved, pushing upward. And then I saw it. A hand, pale, thin, fingers clawing up through the dirt. My hand, rotten, decayed, but undeniably mine. The mourner wailed, louder than ever, her body shuddering as though the grief of centuries poured out of her all at once. I fell backward, screaming, because I realized the grave wasn't being prepared for me. I was already in it. Epilogue. I don't know how long it's been. I wake up sometimes in my apartment, sometimes in the cemetery. Dirt always clings to me. My nails are torn and black, my throat raw from screaming. When I look in mirrors, sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's the rotted version, grinning through broken teeth. I hear her crying every night. Sometimes it's far away. Sometimes it's right beside me. And I know soon the mourner will stop weeping for me. Because when she cries for you, it means you're already buried, and she's just waiting for you to realize it. When you work construction long enough, you stop being surprised by what you dig up. Old bottles, broken bones from farm animals, the occasional rusted pistol. It's all part of tearing into the earth. But none of us had ever seen anything like what we found that summer behind Fairview Cemetery. The town wanted to expand the burial ground. More plots, more money, the foreman said. Our job was to clear the hillside, level the ground, and pour foundations for new headstones. Easy work. The first few days were fine, just dirt, rocks, tree roots. Then, on the fifth day, Hector's backhoe hit something hard. At first, we thought it was just a boulder. But when we cleared the soil away, we saw wood. Rotten, splintered wood. A coffin. No big deal. Cemeteries get sloppy records. Old graves shift. We figured we'd call the town office. Let them deal with it. But then we noticed the holes. The coffin lid had been clawed from the inside. Long grooves carved into the rotting wood, as though someone had tried to dig their way out. And drilled into the lid were tiny, rusted holes. Dozens of them. Air holes. Someone had been buried alive. The first sign. We should have stopped. We should have put the dirt back and walked away. But curiosity got the better of us. When we pried the lid open, we didn't find bones. We found nothing. Empty. The coffin was rotted through, but no remains lay inside, just damp earth and the faint smell of mildew. Animals must have gotten to it, Hector said, though he didn't sound convinced. We filled the hole and kept working. That night, when we went for beers, none of us talked about it. But I could tell we were all thinking the same thing. If there were air holes, if there were claw marks, how the hell did the coffin end up empty? The breathing ground. 2 nights later, we heard it. We were finishing a late shift under floodlights, trying to make up time lost from rain. The night was still, the air heavy with humidity. And then, from the ground, came the sound. A slow, steady rhythm. Inhale, exhale. We killed the machines thinking it was a leak, maybe some busted air pipe underground. But the sound didn't stop. The earth itself was breathing. The dirt rose and fell in a slow rhythm, as though the hillside were a chest rising and falling. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Hector laughed nervously, tried to play it off, but I could see the sweat beading his forehead. The breathing grew louder, deeper, until the floodlights flickered, and then, just for a second, the ground shuddered, like something massive had shifted beneath it. The first disappearance. We came back the next morning to find one of the machines overturned. Hector's backhoe, lying on its side, tracks half swallowed by the dirt. But Hector wasn't there. We figured he'd gone home sick, maybe worked too late and overslept. But when the foreman called his wife, she said he hadn't come home at all. His hard hat was lying near the machine, split down the middle like something had crushed it. And the dirt around the backhoe, it looked disturbed. Not like someone had walked through it, more like the ground itself had shifted, swallowing the machine whole. When I crouched to touch the soil, it was warm, like flesh. And when I pressed my ear against it, God help me, I heard it. A heartbeat. I staggered back from the ground so fast I almost fell. The others stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What is it?" Dave asked. I didn't answer. How could I? The earth has a heartbeat? They'd think I'd gone crazy. But later that night, when we were packing up, I caught Dave kneeling by the dirt where Hector's machine had sunk. His face was pale, ear pressed against the soil. When he stood up, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd heard it too. The second coffin. The next day, another backhoe hit wood. Another coffin. We begged the foreman to call it off, to let the town handle it. But he just barked at us to keep working. "Old graves," he said. "This place is full of them." When we cracked the second coffin open, I wished to God we hadn't. This one wasn't empty. Inside was a body, or what was left of one. Skin stretched tight over bone, lips peeled back from teeth. But the arms, Christ, the arms. The bones had been worn down to splinters from clawing at the wood. The fingers were little more than stumps, and the mouth was open wide, as though frozen in a silent scream. We stood there in silence, the stench of rot thick in our throats. Then the ground beneath the coffin shifted. Not collapsed, shifted, like something deep below had rolled over in its sleep. The corpse's jaw snapped shut with a crack. We dropped the lid and ran. The second disappearance. That night, Dave didn't show up to the bar. We went to his motel, banged on the door. No answer. The manager let us in. The room was empty, bed still made, wallet and phone on the dresser. But the carpet was covered in dirt. Damp, black soil scattered in streaks across the floor, leading from the bed to the window. The window was locked from the inside. The dirt stopped right beneath it, like the ground had reached up and pulled him out. The tunnels, by the third week, half the crew had quit. The rest of us worked under protest, the foreman threatening to dock pay if we walked. That's when we found the tunnels. One of the bulldozers collapsed into a sinkhole, and when we climbed down to inspect it, we found an opening beneath the earth. A tunnel, wide enough for a man to crawl through, walls packed tight with damp soil. And the walls weren't smooth. They were clawed. Thousands of grooves, as if countless hands had dragged themselves through the dirt, digging blindly. And if you listened, really listened, you could hear it. The scraping of nails in the dark, still digging. The third disappearance. We lost the foreman next. One moment he was shouting at us, waving his clipboard, red in the face. The next, the ground beneath him bulged, not collapsed, bulged, like a bubble rising in mud. And then it split open. The soil swallowed him whole in one violent gulp. His scream was cut off before we even realized what had happened. When we rushed forward, the ground was flat again, smooth. No sign he'd ever been there, except for his clipboard, lying on the surface, splattered with wet dirt. And when I picked it up, I saw something written across the paper in muddy streaks. 2 words, feeding time. After the foreman was taken, none of us wanted to keep working, but it was already too late. We'd seen too much, and I think whatever was beneath that cemetery had already noticed us. The awakening. That night, I woke to the sound of shovels. Not just one, dozens. I thought maybe it was in my head, until I saw the dirt shifting outside my motel window. The earth was moving, writhing like a nest of snakes. Mounds of soil pushed upward, fell, pushed upward again, like something was trying to crawl free. I grabbed my boots and ran. When I reached the cemetery, floodlights still burned over the half-dug hillside. But I wasn't alone. Bodies stood among the headstones. Not alive, not quite dead either. Rotten men and women, their mouths caked with dirt, nails broken and bleeding. Their eyes were open but empty, skin pale and stretched, and they were digging. Shovels, hands, teeth, anything they could use. They tore at the soil with animal desperation, as if something inside demanded release. The ground pulsed with each breath. Inhale, exhale, louder than before. The sound shook my ribs, and then the earth split wide open. The thing below. At first I thought it was a cave, a sinkhole, but then I saw the truth. It wasn't earth at all. It was flesh. A vast surface of mottled skin stretched tight beneath the dirt. Veins pulsed across it. Pores opened and closed, sucking in air with each breath. The entire cemetery sat on top of it. A body, a living buried body. Maybe it had been here before the town, before the cemetery, before people. Buried deep, waiting. And the coffins, the burials, they weren't mistakes. They were offerings. The mourner, the coffins with holes, the tunnels, all of it. Every grave was a feeding tube. That thing beneath the ground was alive and hungry. The final dig. The digging corpses turned toward me as one. dirt raining from their hollow sockets. And then they rushed me. I ran, stumbling over gravestones, but the ground shifted under my feet, rising and falling like waves. A sinkhole opened, and I fell, tumbling into the dark. When I landed, I was in one of the tunnels. The walls pressed in close, claw marks gouged deep into the packed soil, and then I felt the air move. Not from in front of me, from behind. A hot, wet exhale washed over my neck. I didn't turn around. I just crawled until my nails split and my knees bled. But the breathing followed me, slow, patient. It didn't need to chase me. It knew where I'd end up. The last grave. I don't remember how I made it out. One moment I was crawling through dirt. The next I was gasping under the night sky, face down on a grave. My grave, freshly dug. The headstone already carved with my name. The ground beneath it pulsed like a heartbeat. And as I staggered to my feet, the soil opened. Just a crack, just enough for me to hear it. A voice. Not words, but something deeper. A thought that pushed straight into my skull. Breathe for me. The grave yawned wide. The air sucked downward. And before I could scream, the dirt rose like a wave and pulled me inside. Epilogue. I don't know if I'm alive anymore. I wake in the tunnels. I wake in the soil. Sometimes I wake in my motel bed with dirt in my lungs. Sometimes I wake inside a coffin that isn't mine, clawing until my fingers snap. And always I hear the breathing. Slow, steady, eternal. It fills my head, fills my chest, until my own lungs don't feel like mine anymore. Sometimes I think I'm breathing with it. Sometimes I think I am it. And I know one day someone else will dig here. They'll find the empty coffins, the claw marks, the tunnels. They'll hear the ground breathing. And then they'll know the truth. You don't bury the dead in Fairview Cemetery. The cemetery buries you.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Was it paranormal or just something we can't explain? Share your thoughts in the comments and remember, never watch alone at night.